Clara's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a sharp, insistent vibration that sliced through the quiet hum of her apartment. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, expecting the usual barrage of work emails or a spam notification. But when she saw the message, her chest tightened, and her stomach sank as though the floor had dropped beneath her. "We're only having your sister's family this year." Her mother's words glared at her from the screen, all caps like a scream rather than a text. Clara stared, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure whether to respond with anger, sarcasm, or tears. She felt an almost physical sting in her chest. Not because of her sister, Clara loved her, but because she had become invisible in the family she had always tried to belong to. Clara typed slowly, carefully, hiding the tremor in her fingers. "Have a good time." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she set the phone down and let the silence of her apartment envelop her, the quiet punctuated by the distant hum of traffic and the faint clatter of dishes from the neighbors' Thanksgiving preparations. A single thought ran through her mind like a looping tape: they don't care. They don't even see me. Memories she had tried to bury rose up in jagged flashes. The holidays where her carefully wrapped presents went unopened. The times her mother praised her sister for every small accomplishment, while Clara's achievements were ignored or dismissed as trivial. The birthdays spent sitting quietly, smiling through cake and candles while her sister basked in the spotlight. She had tried to tell herself it didn't matter, that she didn't need their approval, but every text like this reopened old wounds. Clara's apartment, modest yet warm, suddenly felt like a sanctuary and a cage all at once. She had worked hard, harder than anyone could imagine, to build a life for herself where she wasn't invisible. She had a career, friends who loved her for exactly who she was, and ambitions she was chasing with relentless determination. But despite all of it, a part of her ached for her family's recognition, for that simple acknowledgement that she existed in their world. She sank into her chair at the small dining table, staring at her phone as though it might offer a different message if she waited long enough. Nothing came. Just silence, and the cold reminder that she had been excluded. A part of her wanted to cry. Another part burned with quiet anger, a slow-burning ember of resentment that had been smoldering for years. "Fine," she thought, clenching her fists. "If they want to leave me out, I'll show them what they're missing." And in that instant, a plan began to form in her mind. A small, wicked smile tugged at the corners of her lips as she imagined a Thanksgiving that would make them wish they had never dismissed her. Not out of cruelty, exactly, but out of a need to finally be seen. Finally, to be recognized, not as the forgotten child, but as the woman she had become. For the first time in years, Clara didn't feel small. She felt powerful. Clara's apartment felt quiet, almost too quiet, as she sat curled on her velvet armchair, her mind racing. The sting of exclusion from her mother's message still lingered, but beneath it was something far more potent: determination. She wasn't going to cry this time, not in the face of her family's neglect. She was going to show them a world they hadn't even imagined existed. For years, she had lived a double life, one they would never have guessed. While her mother and sister assumed she was scraping by in a small apartment, Clara had quietly built a life of comfort, success, and influence. She owned a $6 million estate nestled in a serene countryside, far from prying eyes and petty comparisons. It was a home that spoke of elegance and sophistication without screaming wealth: sprawling gardens, marble floors, walls lined with art she had collected from her travels, and a library that smelled faintly of old paper and polished oak. The estate wasn't just a house, it was a monument to her perseverance, her independence, and her refusal to be invisible. Clara's lips curved into a small, almost mischievous smile as she pictured the scene. The estate had never been more ready for a celebration. The grand dining hall could seat dozens, the fireplace could hold 100 stories, and the kitchen, oh, the kitchen, was stocked with ingredients for a feast that could make any five-star restaurant blush. She had spent years perfecting recipes, experimenting with flavors, and collecting the finest wines. Tonight, it would all come together in one dazzling display of abundance and joy. She reached for her phone again, but this time with purpose. One by one, she began sending invitations to everyone her mother's family had overlooked over the years, distant relatives, old friends who had drifted away, colleagues who admired her quietly, and neighbors she had grown close to. Each message carried warmth and excitement, an energy so different from the cold, clipped text from her mother. "You're invited," she typed repeatedly, imagining the laughter, the chatter, and the clinking of glasses filling her halls. As she typed, memories of being overlooked threatened to creep in again, but she pushed them aside. This Thanksgiving would not be about revenge in the petty sense, it would be about celebration, about claiming her worth. She would surround herself with people who appreciated her, who had never doubted her value, and who would make her home feel alive with love and gratitude. For the first time in years, Clara felt a thrill that had nothing to do with work, money, or achievements. This was personal. This was cathartic. She pictured her mother and sister receiving snapshots of the event, their jaws dropping as they scrolled through images of the laughter, the feast, and the vibrant, warm atmosphere. It wasn't cruelty, it was proof. Proof that she had grown into someone they could not ignore, someone who didn't need their approval to shine. The ember of resentment had evolved into something far more satisfying, a quiet, confident anticipation. Clara leaned back, hands clasped behind her head, and allowed herself a moment to savor it. The tables were about to turn, and she would do it with grace, style, and a radiant, unapologetic sense of self. Tonight, the forgotten daughter would become the centerpiece of a celebration they would never forget. The morning of Thanksgiving arrived with a crisp chill in the air, the kind that made Clara's cheeks flush and her spirits soar. She moved through her estate with quiet efficiency, checking details she had rehearsed in her mind for weeks. The grand dining hall gleamed under the morning light, polished silverware arranged perfectly beside crystal glasses, and the aroma of roasting turkey and fresh herbs drifted through the air. Every corner of the house spoke of warmth, elegance, and painstaking attention to detail, everything her family had overlooked in her supposed small life. By mid-afternoon, guests began arriving, their expressions shifting from polite curiosity to delight as they stepped through the doors. Old friends embraced her, distant cousins marveled at the estate, and neighbors exchanged odd glances, whispering about the feast laid out before them. Clara moved gracefully among them, pouring wine, sharing laughter, and effortlessly creating an atmosphere of joy that radiated from her in every gesture. Then, as if on cue, the notifications started to arrive on her phone, messages from her mother, her sister, and aunts and uncles. They were polite at first, thinly veiled questions about her day, but soon they became frantic. A photo of the table overflowing with food, another of the elegantly decorated living room, and finally a group shot of Clara surrounded by dozens of smiling faces. The words from her mother's text, "We're only having your sister's family this year," echoed in her mind, now painfully ironic. Clara glanced at her phone but didn't rush to reply. She wanted them to feel the sting of what they had ignored, not through malice, but through clarity. Here she was, thriving, radiant, surrounded by people who appreciated her, creating a memory they had chosen to exclude her from. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the estate's gardens, Clara led her guests to the table. The feast was a symphony of colors and aromas, roasted turkey glistening, honey-glazed carrots, creamy mashed potatoes, and desserts that made mouths water just by looking at them. Laughter rang out as wine glasses clinked and stories were shared, the atmosphere alive with connection and warmth. Clara moved through it all with quiet satisfaction, noting the genuine smiles and sparkling eyes of everyone around her. She paused near the fireplace, watching a group of children chase one another across the polished floors, their laughter echoing off the walls. She felt a tug of something deeper, contentment mingled with the bittersweet recognition of what had been denied to her. For years, she had wanted acknowledgement from her family, but now she realized she didn't need it. She had created something far more enduring, love, joy, and a space where she was seen and celebrated for exactly who she was. Her phone buzzed again. Messages poured in from her mother and sister, their texts frantic, bewildered, and tinged with envy. Clara allowed herself a small, victorious smile, but she didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. The photos, the laughter, the warmth, these spoke louder than words ever could. For the first time in a long while, Clara felt fully alive. The forgotten daughter had become the heartbeat of a celebration no one would ever forget. And in that moment, she understood something profound. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge wasn't in confrontation, it was in thriving, in being unshakably, unapologetically yourself. The morning after Thanksgiving, Clara woke to a phone vibrating incessantly on her nightstand. Groggy at first, she reached for it and froze. Messages, notifications, and missed calls poured in from every family member she had ignored over the years, and, most alarmingly, from the ones who had ignored her. Her mother's name appeared repeatedly, followed by her sister's frantic texts. Each ping felt like a small drumbeat, announcing the arrival of consequences she had anticipated but still found deliciously satisfying. Clara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sipped her coffee, wrapped in a soft robe, and scrolled through the flood of messages. Shock, envy, confusion, and thinly veiled guilt filled the texts. "Clara, what is this?" her mother typed. "How could you?" her sister added, punctuated by a series of crying emojis. Some messages were polite, almost cautious, attempting reconciliation, while others bristled with the indignation Clara had expected. She allowed herself a small smile, a quiet triumph that didn't need to be shouted. She had never set out to humiliate anyone, she had simply claimed her space, her joy, and her recognition. And in doing so, she had revealed the truth her family had refused to see for years: she was no longer the overlooked, invisible child. She was powerful, accomplished, and unapologetically alive. Clara spent the morning replying selectively, crafting her responses carefully. She didn't gloat. She didn't apologize. Instead, she maintained a calm, almost regal tone that only amplified the weight of her success. To some, it was a gentle rebuke; to others, it was a mirror reflecting the consequences of their neglect. Every word was measured, a subtle reminder that she didn't need validation from those who had never valued her. Later, she reviewed the photos and videos of the celebration. Laughter and light filled every frame. Friends, colleagues, and extended family mingled with ease, their joy palpable even through the lens of a camera. Clara's heart swelled, not with revenge, but with pride. She had created a Thanksgiving that mattered, a celebration rooted in love, warmth, and inclusion. She had transformed her exclusion into an opportunity, and in doing so, she had strengthened her sense of self-worth. By the afternoon, her mother and sister had called, their voices wavering between apology and disbelief. Clara listened calmly, acknowledging their words without allowing their guilt to overshadow her triumph. She realized something essential: she didn't need their recognition to feel complete. Their remorse was theirs to manage; her life, her joy, and her accomplishments were entirely her own. As the day waned, Clara sat in the grand living room of her estate, the fire crackling softly, and reflected on the past. The hurt she had felt was real, but it no longer held power over her. The sting of being overlooked had been transformed into fuel for ambition, independence, and, yes, a little sweet satisfaction. She understood, too, that the world didn't have to affirm her worth; she could create her own spaces of love, respect, and celebration. Finally, she placed her phone aside, letting the remaining notifications fade into silence. Clara leaned back, a serene smile touching her lips. For the first time, she felt entirely seen, not by those who had ignored her, but by herself and the life she had built. The forgotten daughter had grown into a woman unstoppable, unshakable, and unforgettable.